Okay, this is Mr. Ellis. We're going to talk about the PowerPoint notes. Okay, if you're in your Microsoft Teams, you'll go to your files, class materials, and you are looking for ecosystem new PowerPoint. There it is. So we're going to open it up right quick. We're going to walk you through it. Okay, let's see if I can get where it's a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Would that be the full screen slideshow? Yeah. Okay, ecosystem. Understand how organisms interact with and respond to the biotic and abiotic components of their environment. Okay, how would you describe the area where you live? I mean, we live in North Carolina, so we have oceans and mountains. Types of trees that grow. We have a lot of pine trees. We have a lot of deciduous and evergreen trees. You all know deciduous means that it loses its leaves in the fall. Okay, everything that surrounds you makes up your environment. So all organisms live and all organisms live and depend on their environment. Yeah, I might have talked about this before about biotic and abiotic factors. All earthly organisms are found in what we call the biosphere. That includes your land, your water, lowest part atmosphere. Now, each grade level, you've talked about a sphere. In sixth grade, you talked about lithosphere, which is the soil, the ground, the earth. In seventh grade, you talked about the atmosphere, which is like the air. And then, of course, we talked about hydrosphere at the beginning of the year. So biosphere is where all the living things live. Okay, remember, living things can be found almost everywhere, including very hot and cold places as well as the deep ocean. We talked about that in our ocean section. Ecosystem includes all the living and non-living parts of an environment and how they interact with each other. Your biotic are your living parts. That includes the remains and waste. So yes, dog poop, your poop is a biotic factor. A rotten tree log is a biotic factor. If it was once alive, it is biotic. Okay, abiotic are your non-living things: light, temperature, weather, soil, water. Those are the things that are non-living and they affect the environment. Abiotic factors determine which organisms can live in an ecosystem. An ecosystem contains different habitats. And the habitat we know is where a place where an organism lives. Supplies all the biotic and abiotic factors an organism needs to survive. And different organisms need different habitats. Habitats all supply the same basic needs: air, warmth, water, and food. Okay, now a niche is probably a new word for you. A niche is like an organism's role, how an organism acts within its ecosystem. Like I said, organisms' role. Some animals eat other animals, carnivores. Some eat plants, herbivores. Some plants grow in sunny areas, some need shade. You got worms and bacteria break down the dead organisms for energy and recycle those nutrients in the ecosystem. Those are called decomposers. And this creates biodiversity. And biodiversity is the variety of life in the world in a particular habitat or ecosystem. Now you can watch these two videos of a decomposing rat and fox. Hopefully the links work. I'm not going to go to it right now because y'all can do that on your own. Because you can get this PowerPoint in your teams. Okay, the levels of organization. An organism is any living thing, and that's the simplest level. Okay, now a species is a group of all the organisms that share the most characteristics and can breed with one another. And a population is all the organisms in a species that live in that same place. Okay, they usually compete with resources for survival. A community is all the population that live in an area at the same time. And of course, ecosystem as the non-living component of the environment. Example would be frogs. You got one frog that's an organism. The species would be like a certain type of bullfrog. Okay, the population would be the certain type of bullfrogs in a pond behind my house. Okay, then the community would be the bullfrogs in the pond, the snakes in the pond, the flies, the lily pads, the trees, and all that kind of stuff. The fish, that would be the community. And in the ecosystem, you would add the water, the temperature, the ground, any kind of rocks, anything like that. Okay, populations in the community interact in many ways. They compete for resources like water and space. Okay, they compete for food. Okay, some avoid competition by finding different roles, different niches, like eating at night or other animal leftovers. Plants also compete for resources like water, sunlight, and living space. There's another video you can click on to watch called Cheetahs Never Win. It's kind of a punny thing, isn't it? Okay, other relationships in ecosystems. An ecosystem includes all the living and non-living things that interact with each other in a certain environment. Organisms interact with each other as well as with other organisms of their own species. Limiting factors are conditions of the environment that limit the growth of a species. In a desert, the limiting factor, of course, would be water. Okay, biotic and abiotic factors that prevent the continuous growth of a population. this pandemic that we're in. That's a limiting factor. Population would continue to increase if they had all the resources they require in unlimited amounts, but there are always factors that limit their increase. And limiting factors control the population growth. Carrying capacity is the finite capacity for growth. Okay, in our classroom, our carrying capacity would be 30 kids. Okay, we can't put 50 kids in the classroom. Okay, we sure wouldn't have no social distancing then, would we? So that's your carrying capacity. Every environment has a certain number of animals it can hold. There's another little video you can watch. Competition occurs when organisms in the ecosystem try to get the same results, and it is density dependent. Okay, you got to, like I told one class, I take candy and I throw it out in the middle of the classroom. Y'all can, it's easier to get some, everybody can get some. But if I put y'all in that little room at the back of my room, that little closet room, and put all y'all in there and put the candy and threw it out there, maybe some of y'all getting hurt because everybody wouldn't be able to get a piece because it wouldn't be as much space. Okay. When organisms compete, some will get the resources they need to survive and some won't. And those that don't, they either die, they move away, or they'll die. Coexist is when two organisms actually live in the same area in the habitat, but they don't have the same resources. For instance, a bird in a tree. You can have some birds that rely on eating the insects that are living in the bark of the tree, like maybe a woodpecker, and then you could have like a quail that lives at the bottom of the tree. It doesn't eat, they would coexist. And you might have some bluebirds that might live in the top of the tree. Okay, they would all coexist because they're not going for the same food source. Okay, cooperation is usually when you have animals in the same species working together. A pack of wolves would be cooperation. Bees in a hive, ants on an anthill, they work in cooperation. Y'all do cooperation when y'all in my classroom. I hope y'all doing some cooperation with this pandemic stuff. Y'all need to be talking to each other, helping each other out. I ain't got to tell y'all that. Predation. Okay, that's the predator-prey relationship. Predator is the animal that kills and eats another one. Prey is the one that's being killed and eaten. Okay, and remember, some animals can be both prey and predator. Snake. A snake is a predator to a rat. However, a snake is the prey of a owl or a hawk. Okay, the second section we're talking about is ecological relationships, and it's called symbiosis. That's when two things kind of interact together. Two different species of organisms living together. So it's not really cooperation. This is when cooperation is when the same species are living together. Symbiosis is when two different ones are living together. The first one is mutualism. That's a relationship where both species benefit. A bee and a flower. They benefit. The bee gets food from the flower, the pollen, and then the bee helps the flower reproduce. Okay, because the pollen gets on the bee's body, the bee takes it to another flower and it pollinates it. Commensalism is a relationship where one species benefits without benefiting or harming another one. Example of this would be like cows in a pasture. Okay, and birds. The cows and the birds, their benefit. The cows move around, they walk around in the grass, they cause insects to move up, to fly into there. So when those insects come up, the birds are there and they eat the insects. Now, it benefits the birds because they're getting food. But the cows, it doesn't benefit or harm them. They're just there. Okay? It's just like a side benefit, a side product. Now, parasitism, you know, we talked about this when we talked about diseases. A parasite is an organism that lives on another organism. A tapeworm inside of an animal. Like we can get tapeworms. Dogs can get worms. A tick. We talked about ticks causing Lyme disease. Tick is a parasite. Mosquitoes are parasites. Okay, those are things that the host is always the one that gets the host is the one that is actually endangered and harmed when we're talking about a parasite-host relationship. Okay, there's your picture. Mutualism. You got the crocodile and a little bird to clean his teeth. You got the little or the little on the right is the parasite of some kind of worm or something inside the fish. It's going to end up killing the fish eventually. And then the commensalism would be the little fish that swim around the shark. They just ride around with the shark trying to get his scraps. Okay, he doesn't eat them because he doesn't like what they taste like, probably. Okay, ecosystems, three main categories. You have terrestrial ecosystems, which deals with land. You have freshwater, which we talked about, and we talked about marines. No, not the marines in the military, but like marine ocean system. We've already talked about ocean and freshwater at the beginning of the year. Okay, and you can see the examples: forests, deserts, grasslands are terrestrial, rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands are freshwater, and then of course marine would be saltwater. We also would include the estuaries that we talked about earlier in the year. Okay, North Carolina's main terrestrial ecosystems are forests. They're described as temperate deciduous. Temperate means it's a mild climate. Y'all know our weather in North Carolina. It can be cold one day and hot the next. Okay, deciduous means the trees lose leaves. I said that earlier here. There's you a picture of a video of some guys cycling from the mountains to the coast, and you can see the different ecosystems in North Carolina. Okay, the third section we're talking about is the flow of energy in the ecosystem. We all know that we need energy for our cells to function. Okay, and we eat food for that. Because there's need for energy, organisms are connected by the feeding relationships. As you know, the video right here, I think you can click on producers, consumers, and decomposers. Now, producers, I always tell people producers begin with a P. So do plants. Producers are plants, or plants are producers. They're organisms that make their own food. They're also called autotrophs, self-making. Okay, so producers would be your plants. We talked about algae. Some bacteria are photosynthetic. And they usually make their food through photosynthesis, where they use the light energy, they take the carbon dioxide from the air and water, and they produce glucose and oxygen. Glucose is the sugar, oxygen they produce, and of course that's how we get our oxygen, from these producers. Okay, and another type of producer we talked about was in the bacteria at the bottom of the ocean, in the deep hydrothermal vents. They use chemosynthesis. Since they can't get light, they use the chemicals from the Earth's core and the magma that's coming up and the gases. Consumer, that's what we are. We're the organisms that we cannot make our own food. We have to go get from somewhere else. We're also called heterotrophs. Hetero means, hetero means different. Tropes mean we get our food from different sources. Okay, we eat producers, plants. And when you eat vegetables and you eat fruits, you eat bread, you're eating producers. Okay, now, and we also eat other consumers. When you eat that steak, that hamburger, that pork chop, barbecue, when you eat that meat, you're eating a consumer, and you're eating another consumer. Now we have first order consumers. Those are the ones that feed directly on producer. Those would be our herbivores, cows, deer, rabbits. Okay. Second order consumers, they feed on their first order, and then of course the third order, they feed on the second order. And you can see a food chain down here. You got the producers, the grass, and then the primary consumer is the grasshopper, because the grasshopper's eating the grass. And then the secondary consumer is the frog, who eats the grasshopper. And then of course, anything after the second, we also call them tertiary consumers. So, the raccoon eats the frog, and then the owl eats the raccoon. The owl will die, decompose into the ground and go back into the cycle. It's like the cycle of life, like Lion King, the circle of life, okay? Now, decomposers are very important. These are organisms that gets energy by breaking down the remains of dead organisms and the waste of living things. Your mushrooms are decomposers. Your fungi. Your bacteria are decomposers. They are also, we're not really considered, they're considered heterotrophs because they don't make their own food. They kind of break it down from something else that was once alive. Like I said, most fungi and bacteria involved. Earthworms and insects can also be decomposers. They are nature's recyclers. I mean, y'all know when we die, they put us in the ground, or if you get buried, not if you get cremated, but if you get buried, you get put in the ground, your body rots, all the cells and everything, all the chemicals and everything that's in your body, the carbon and nitrogen, oxygen, all that stuff goes into the ground, goes into the air, and is refiltered and goes back into the system. And we'll talk about those cycles in a few minutes. So food chains and food webs. A trophic level is each feeding level in the ecosystem. The producers make up the first level, and as the consumers at each level get energy by feeding on organisms at the lower level. And as you go up the chain, it actually gets less energy. On a food chain, there's a series of organisms which each feeds on the one and the next. Y'all have seen that before in elementary school. Okay, and of course it goes back around to make a circle, because the decomposers will break down the remains and waste of organisms in the chain, and then it'll go back to the producers again that grow on the ground. Food chains only show one path for flow of energy, okay, whereas a food web shows all interconnections. You can see the different food webs right here. They're all which way, okay? It's like a food web is kind of like a bunch of food chains put together. Population of organisms in a food web are all connected. If you change one population, it affects the other, and vice versa. If all the frogs die, that means all the insects are going to increase, and then the animals that eat frogs, like snakes, they might decrease. or they'll have to go eat something else or move to a different environment. An example of it is if a disease decreases the number of grasshoppers, that would lead to a decreased number of small birds that feed on the grasshoppers. And this would cause the higher level consumers like foxes and hawks to move away or die off. That's another example. Okay, not all energy from one trophic level is transferred. Remember we talked about how energy is lost when we talked about the law of conservation of mass, how mass is lost, or it can be lost through the environment by energy. Well, we have this other thing in the energy pyramid. Now, it's a graphical representation, it's usually a triangle, because it's shaped like a pyramid, of the trophic levels by which the incoming solar energy is transferred into an ecosystem. Remember, all energy comes from the sun. That's where the plants get their energy. So organisms at each level use some of the energy to carry out life processes. They release some into the environment as heat. And we talked about that, releasing it as heat. Some is stored in the organisms, like bones in their teeth. Some parts cannot be decomposed or consumed, like your bones can't really be broken down. Okay, now you can't read it on this little thing right here, but on you'll be able to see it. Only, this is key, only about 10% of the energy is passed to the next level. So 90% of the energy is lost. So when we're eating a piece of lettuce, we're only getting 10% of the energy. We're losing 90% of it. Here's an example of a pyramid. The producers use on the bottom, and they're bigger. That's why it's not the bottom of the pyramid. There's more producers. You can see right here the percentages. 100% on the right, one on the right. The rainforest leaves 100% of the energy, and only 10% when the insects, larvae, the baby insects that eat the leaves. And then, of course, you go to 1% with the little monkey, the bonobo monkey, chimp, whatever it is. He eats the little insect larvae. And then, of course, the crocodile gets 0.1% because the crocodile might eat the poor little monkey, okay? So there's a 10% loss of your original energy as it climbs up. It's always 10%. You watch this video right here, show you what give you a little bit more better explanation, and we're not going to draw that pyramid right here. Okay, the cycle of matter. A lot of these cycles you've already talked about in the earlier grades or in my class. Okay, we know the Earth constantly receives energy from the sun. Because of this, the amount of matter does not change, just its form on Earth. Man, we talk about with water. Matter is recycled from organisms to the environment and back again. The three main cycles are carbon, nitrogen, water. How the ecosystem works, another little video that you can watch. Now, water, we've talked about the water cycle. The carbon cycle, you probably haven't. Okay, the carbon cycle is what carbon moves among the air, the ground, and the plants and animals. Okay, carbon is found in all living things. Okay, it's also found in the atmosphere. Gasoline from our fossil fuels and from rocks. Carbon stored in organisms cannot be reused until that organism dies. Okay, it's eaten, decomposes, that kind of thing. Decomposition. The bacteria or other decomposers break down dead organisms. We talked about that. And then carbon dioxide is released in the atmosphere in this process. So when something is rotting, carbon is actually going into the environment, into the air. I'm getting into the plants probably like that. Combustion. We talked about burning fossil fuels like coal and oil. When we burn those, they actually produce carbon dioxide put into the air. So anytime you're burning any kind of fuel. Here's an example. You got the carbon dioxide in the air. It goes into the tree. The tree absorbs that carbon dioxide. And then, of course, animals eat that plant. Decomposing matter, carbon dioxide can go in the air. Also, carbon can get into the ground. You know, animals, we eat plants. That's where we can get carbon. We also get carbon indirectly from eating animals. But we get most of our carbon from eating plants. Every time you eat some sugar, you're eating carbon. Every time you're eating some bread, any plants, vegetables, fruits, you're getting carbon. Okay, the nitrogen cycle. That's the movement of nitrogen to the environment. Now, this one's a little bit more difficult to understand. Okay, you know, nitrogen is found in many places, in many forms, but most of it is in the atmosphere as a nitrogen gas because there's more actual nitrogen in the atmosphere that we breathe than there's oxygen. Okay, and we use these nitrogen to make proteins. And in proteins, we need proteins because they help us grow and repair our bodies. And your proteins are a lot of times in your meats, your beans, fish, eggs, those kind of things. And so we can't actually get nitrogen from the air. We cannot use it in grass form. So what happens is you have something called nitrogen fixation. It's the natural process where they convert nitrogen from the atmosphere into a form that is useful for a variety of organisms. Usually bacteria do this in the soil. Nitrogen will get into the soil, the bacteria will break it down, and they'll produce what we call ammonium nitrate. Nitrogen, and then what happens is the bacteria in the soil turn that nitrogen into something that the plant roots can use, and it goes up into the plants. And then, of course, we eat the plants, or we eat animals that eat plants, and that's how we get our nitrogen, our protein for our proteins. Okay, every time you pee, you're letting out nitrogen, ammonia. You're letting out nitrogen. Fertilizers that we put on food usually contains nitrogen. Remember our nitrates and phosphates? Denitrification is when you take the nitrogen from nitrates and other compounds in the soil and release it as a nitrogen gas. So when it goes back into the atmosphere, it's called denitrification. And here's your example. You got nitrogen in the air. It goes into the ground. Okay. The plants take it and they actually absorb it into their roots. Bacteria fix nitrogen for use by plants. Then you go up here, it goes to the tree. The nitrogen gives plants, the animals eat it. And then it goes, when things die or an animal pees, something dies or it gives off waste, the nitrogen will go back into the atmosphere, either in the ground or in the air. And you can go online and see a whole bunch of these, okay? There's a video right here on the carbon cycle. You probably can find tons of videos. Watch the videos if you want to. I'm not big on that. You can watch them if you want to, okay? I know y'all got other stuff to do, like Miss Water Society's work, okay? So I think that's it. And that is all of that stuff right there. I hope I didn't take too long. Let me get rid of this. I'm ready to exit out of here, and I'm going to stop this thing. Y'all have a good one.